Do the digital currencies pose any kinds of risks?
Digital currencies is a new technology, and there is a number of new risks introduced like that. It's a very complex technology. It's based on the blockchain technology, which is rather complex topic, particularly around security perspective. So there are new risk categories in terms of technical. It's also in terms of how you use them, how you're monitoring the risk. For example, we don't have much information about cryptocurrencies historically. Usually when you assess and evaluate the risk of an asset, like any other asset class, like equities or currencies, you look at the history of how it's performing history, so you calculate, you gather data from last X many years, see how it moves, how it co-moves with other factors in the economy. In the case of cryptocurrencies, we don't have that information. We don't know. We don't have the information on why it behaves the way it does, why it's so volatile, which it is. We don't have a good understanding, if any, of the fundamental values of the cryptocurrencies. So we can see a price of a certain currency. We don't really know if that is a so-called fair value or not, because we don't have anything to benchmark it against. In addition to that, they're very risky. They carry high risks. They're expensive to use. The transactions costs are high. All that means that in its current form, it's still difficult to use it as a good alternative to a normal fiat currency. So there is an initial fascination or interest in it, and there's certainly interesting technology. But as of now, we still have like a number of unsolved risks to assess and consider before we can really apply it.
How do you think we can address the risks with the digital currencies and cryptocurrencies? Do we need some kind of new regulations or what?
Yes. So that's an ongoing discussion to what extent it can be covered by existing regulation, or we need to design new regulation. I think there are good reasons to pursue new regulation, and there have been executive order released in the US about promoting the responsible use of digital currencies. There are certain frameworks that could be applied, existing risk management frameworks that are all being used in the financial service industry that potentially could be used. But then on the other hand, there are so many unique cryptocurrency risks that it may not be clear if we always can apply existing frameworks like financial services stress testing framework or enterprise risk management frameworks to cryptocurrencies, or we're better off starting from a different perspective of the cryptocurrency perspective.
Many experts say that we really need new kinds of regulations in this sphere, but many people do not imagine what kind of regulations, what changes do we actually need, if you know what I mean. Like, do we need to try to centralize the decentralized projects, or what do we need to do to make it kind of safer? But
yeah, I mean, decentralized, I think that's against the whole idea of a blockchain technology that it is.
But that's also one of the causes of the dangers that it can pose.
Right. I mean, the government decides to what extent they're willing to accept that a currency, whether it's a fiat currency or cryptocurrency. So in that, the government has the mandate to make the call whether they want to make this a fully integrated currency or not. But I think, like, from a regulatory perspective, it's more about considering the risks, like the fact that we don't understand it. To what extent institutional and retail investors invest in it, and how much exposure investors get to it. There could be certain requirements on that part. There could be requirements in terms of exposure, the size, cross-jurisdiction, where the currencies are, which jurisdiction we're exposed to, which kind of currencies, because there are many different kinds, they're all different. Some are more complex than others, depending on how the protocols have been set up. There could be restrictions on the requirements, how they've been designed, consensus algorithms, for example. Those are some of the topics that could be, yeah.
Have you ever thought what kind of regulations would you personally introduce if you were the one to make this choice, make this decision?
What I would use, I would say so. I would be very specific about which currencies we would be able to use from a investor side, which currencies institutional investors are allowed to invest in or not. I would say requirements about the protocols, consensus protocols, and generally more regulations about the safety and security about the cryptocurrencies. It's difficult to regulate because it's rather complex, but those are some of the critical concerns about digital currencies.
Which currencies would you choose to allow to be used? Or how would you even assess which ones are safer? If we can.
That's a difficult question. There has to be some kind of assessment, and I don't have like a specific preferred currency. I don't have the requirements of matrix for how that should be assessed. But that illustrates the complexity of it. It's not that simple, binary, right or wrong in terms of how to assessing this.
Do you see any specific dangers, risks connected to cyber attacks? Is having a digital currency riskier in terms of cyber attacks than having, a usual currency?
I mean, there are specific risks in terms of like a basic blockchain risk is forking. The wallet's ownership is a risk. Private key management is a specific risk that you don't have on a fiat currency. So there's certainly complex issues to be addressed that you don't have for a fiat currency.
So overall, do you have any ideas about how today's people can address the risks with digital currencies?
For retail investors, individuals, I would say access to the wallets, to private keys is the most critical risk for retail investors.
Just be careful with what they're doing.
And get to know the currency. There are many currencies around. Some are legit and others are not legit. Making sure that it's a trustworthy currency, that the exchange is trustworthy. We have seen examples of the opposite in the past. That's something you want to think about as a retail investor.
What about businesses, companies? How can they minimize the risks?
It's a lot the same thing. Be careful about the wallet security. Be mindful about the access to the currency, which kind of currency, and obviously the value of the currency. We're not really able to predict how the currencies are how they're going to perform. Okay, you can say that about so many equities, but in particular this case, we don't really have any information. We're not able to do any analysis of performance of it. We don't have the history. We don't have any information about the fundamental value of this asset, unlike equities, for example. You do have an idea of what an underlying value is. You don't really have that for cryptocurrency because it's software, it's technology.
Yeah.
It does not have an underlying value.
That's
always going to be an inherent risk in its current form.
And it should be taken into account.
It should. For US dollars or any other currency, there's also always going to be a currency risk, but it's relatively limited and it's possible to hedge it. A cryptocurrency value risk is much less clear. We have stable coins that appears to be have a certain fundamental value until it's no longer backed up, in which case it has no value. So there is a general risk about the fundamental values of these currencies.